there's almost darker forms now, whether it's the effective altruism, which is, a lot of people are talking about now since the crash of FTX, which was a crypto exchange started by one of the main funders of the effective altruism movement, which is the idea that you don't do as much good doing good as you do by making money and then donating some of it to do good. So stop worrying about treating people nicely. Stop worrying about whether your business is, destroying the planet or hurting other people. As long as you make a ton of money, you're going to more efficiently, by some utilitarian algorithm that we've developed, we can justify, you take 5% of your income and give it to charity, you're doing more good long term than you are by actually being a good person.
Author, media theorist, and fellow podcaster Doug Rushkoff joins the Plutopia podcast as we discuss his latest book, Survival of the Richest, Escape Fantasies of the Tech Billionaires. We also explore technoutopians, capitalism, billionaire tech bros, psychedelic tech bros, the mindset, going meta, the blockchain and crypto, QAnon, and much more.
So welcome everybody to yet another episode of the Plutopia podcast, a very special episode because Doug Rushkoff is with us today, and he has just released a new book, which is kind of an amazing book. In fact, I don't know how we're going to cover even a fraction of it in our conversation today because we've only got an hour. But the book is called Survival of the Richest. And as far as I'm concerned, it's like, it's the Rosetta Stone of contemporary reality. It sort of explains everything. How did you do that, Doug? How did you pull all those insights together?
Well, with more trying to figure out how these experiences happened, how they make sense. I've been alive a while now. I mean, and I've been watching the net go from its potential to its reality, from around 1990 to today, I guess. So it's, 33 years of that. And I guess I had to make sense of it. So I took sort of my intuition combined with my research and history and looking at what are the threads that got us here between capitalism and technology and engineering and hubris and masculinity and Western civilization. How do they all sort of combine to get us to a place where a bunch of college dropout billionaires are looking for ways to escape from the rest of us?
Now, back in the old days, they called us techno-utopian, but this is hardly a utopia.
Well, it's techno-solutionism, at least, and I think they're looking for a utopia for them, even if it's on Mars or in the cloud or, in some bunker somewhere or on an island, seasteading.
Maybe one man's dystopia is another man's utopia.
In their case, yeah, but that's the way capitalism's always worked. You make a lot of money and externalize the damage to someone else. You come to the Western world and do like Hobbes said and treat the Native Americans like, shrubs that not even shrubs, but you shouldn't treat shrubs that way, but like shrubs that you can just bulldoze over and not, see them as part of the landscape rather than as divine thinking creatures. You treat all of humanity that way. Really, that's the big difference today. We've been doing this for centuries, right? We find people, usually darker than us, and take their land and their women and enslave their people and take their resources and whatever. Now, just that capitalism's gotten to the place now that the elite and the companies on the top, they're not just doing it to other people, they're doing it to their own people. They're doing it to Americans too.
Well, now you get the slaves to vote for you.
Right. Willingly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they see in you a chance for their own freedom of expression and all. I mean, in some ways, it's the failure of Marxism was what we're looking at. Marxism had such a bless his heart, but he was such a social scientist at heart.
Was
He
that
was looking.
Groucho or Chico?
Yeah, really.
Sorry.
This is more Zeppo, I think, or we're going to the more the further out Marx Brothers. No, but I mean, you know what I mean? There was something almost techno-solutionist in his model as well. We could use sort of math and spreadsheet and equality and make everything work like that. And I think it feels to a lot of people, particularly a hubristic tech bro, as some sort of diminution of the human spirit. I mean, and I identify with that. I wrote books like that, books like Team Human. We're all about, where's me? Where's my agency? Where's my autonomy? So, I identify with that sensibility.
Early in the book, you wrote that wealth and power is or experience of wealth and power is akin to removing the part of the brain critical to empathy and socially appropriate behavior. And locally here in Central Texas, we have a person who might be the poster boy for such behavior, Anon something or other. But when you wrote that, I'm sure you were observing how things were then. Has that changed in the interim? Or have we gotten better about, had the wealthy gotten better about that, or have we gotten worse?
Well, I mean, in that section of the book, I'm referring to a couple of studies that were done on billionaires where they found that they don't respond the same way we do to like a picture of a starving baby. The part of the brain that's supposed to, the part of the brain that lights up for most people, where your mirror neurons are showing that you identify with the pain and suffering of the other. Those don't light up for the billionaire, and most people now believe that the reason why that's happened to them, because it doesn't happen before, the reason why it's happened to them is the kinds of compromises and externalized harm they've had to justify giving to others, has forced them to sort of desensitize to that. I mean, what we've seen, and you can't really say much since I wrote this, since I only wrote it a couple months ago, not that much has changed. What we have seen over the last few years, though, is the development of things that look like empathy, or things that look like charity, or that look like concern for social justice, but are not. So, you could look at social entrepreneurialism. How can I invest in something, make a ton of money, and do good for the world? So I'm gonna, you can invest in some, venture capital fund of Al Gore, and that invest in a bunch of solar panels or lithium batteries or something else. As long as there's that sort of that version of the Green New Deal which says that yes, and yes, we can save the world and become millionaires and billionaires and create more jobs and grow the economy and grow the GDP at the same time. But there's almost darker forms now, whether it's the effective altruism, which is, a lot of people are talking about now since the crash of FTX, which was a crypto exchange started by one of the main funders of the effective altruism movement, which is the idea that you don't do as much good doing good as you do by making money and then donating some of it to do good. So stop worrying about treating people nicely. Stop worrying about whether your business is, destroying the planet or hurting other people. As long as you make a ton of money, you're going to more efficiently, by some utilitarian algorithm that we've developed, we can justify, you take 5% of your income and give it to charity, you're doing more good long-term than you are by actually being a good person. And I don't buy that at all. It's like a pure ends justifies the means way of understanding, of doing good. And then finally, there's the group, the people who I most identified with, I guess, the sort of more psychedelic tech bros, who they've got their tech company, but now they're going to fly down to ayahuasca, ayahuasca Central down in South America somewhere, and do a vision vine with a expensive shaman and see the light and then come back with a software stack to save humanity, some new humane technology stack game B meta modern, eco civilization that's gonna as long as we all follow your rules and use your complete plan, then everything will work out for everybody.
One of the key concepts in your book is you refer to it as the mindset. What is the mindset?
Well,
the mindset.
Yeah, I mean, the mindset is a kind of Silicon Valley belief system that it's got a lot of facets to it, between techno-solutionism and capitalism and this kind of scientistic atheism where they have a staunch materialism and this understanding of all problems can be engineered away. But really what it comes down to is a belief that with enough money and technology, these dudes can outrun the damage they're creating with money and technology. So the idea is that you can somehow build a car that could drive fast enough to escape from its own exhaust. And that is basically insane, it defies the laws of physics. There isn't a perpetual energy machine that will let them do this. But the mindset ends up then seeing us, humanity, as kind of the first stage of a rocket that can sort of be discarded as the elite or the chosen ones continue on their journey. So human beings, the 8 billion of us alive today, are the kind of the larva in humanity's evolution towards its great metamorphosis to its next stage that none of us will get to experience.
Wow, they sound a little like vampires, feeding off the blood of the masses.
Yeah, and it's what dictators and capitalists have always done. Only now, with this sort of extra boost of digital technology, they have it's both accelerated, like almost like when a person takes steroids, it's kind of accelerated for a time until they crash. But it also, digital has allowed them to create this kind of a symbol system. It's digital is not real. Digital is meta. It's a metaphor. So you've got these guys, and that's almost the easiest way to understand the mindset, is people that want to go meta on the world that we're living in, whether it's Peter Thiel going from 0 to 1 and wanting to, telling all businesses, you've got to be 1 order of magnitude above everybody else. You have to be at least 10x better to avoid the competition down there. Or Mark Zuckerberg literally, building Meta when Facebook dies, go from Web 2 to Web 3, or financial guys, creating derivatives of stocks or derivatives of derivatives. Everyone keeps going meta on reality in order to kind of operate from 1 order of magnitude above mere mortals and see themselves as gods.
Well, when Zuckerberg went meta, it seemed to crash the worth of his empire. And there's a lot of this, not showboating in tech, where you've got to show up the competition, and everybody needs to get involved in whatever the latest thing is. And I've seen that with just saying the word blockchain will immediately get their interest. When we did a podcast about blockchain, and I put it into the tag on the YouTube channel, it generated one of the biggest crowds we've ever had on a podcast, just because of the blockchain tag. Everybody wanted to be on it. Everybody wants to be in the blockchain, no matter whether they understand it or not. And now, crypto is, the big Ponzi scheme. You wrote about the Ponzi scheme in the early internet. Well, this is the latest Ponzi scheme. Where does crypto go from here?
Well, it's all really self-similar, right? The thing that took the internet 10 years to do, which was have its .com boom and bust, took, you know, it took crypto, 2 years or whatever, well, more. I mean, really, crypto's been around since, 2011 when Bitcoin came up. I mean, Bitcoin came up not as a Ponzi. Bitcoin came up kind of as tech support for Occupy Wall Street. It was, okay, we can use pretty good privacy and Tor networks to create these sort of stacks of PGP authenticated transactions that we will store in blocks. And we're going to do it on the Tor network so that it's decentralized. And those of us who understood that understood the possibility of it was for point-to-point authentication. Peer-to-peer authentication between people was the joy of it. And the problem was that people looked at it the same way they looked at the internet. The internet, we saw it as, oh my gosh, peer-to-peer media. We are the media. This is going to be cool. Wall Street comes and looks at it and says, oh no, this is something to invest in, and created the .com boom and bust and all that. Same with crypto. Oh, peer-to-peer authentication. No, Ponzi scheme. Let's invest in these the tokens themselves. It's like investing in the poker chips themselves. And they are just poker chips, particularly in a world where you can only pay taxes with a national currency. Anything else is not money. Anything else is a representation of money and only becomes money when you translate it. So it was never about the tokens. The tokens were there not to gain value. The tokens were there to
as currency, right?
Yes, as currency, but it's not a value in itself. It's a ledger. And so the same crazy thing happens, and the funny thing is people like you or me who may understand the technology, because we're back from the cypherpunk days. We were writing and hanging out with them. We understood what this was. And I would write pieces about it. And I would have sort of young people or crypto enthusiasts saying, oh, Rushkoff doesn't understand. He really doesn't understand how this works. I'm like, no. You don't understand how this works or what's happening here. And the thing is that blockchain is still an interesting ledger solution. It's just you have to look at who's getting paid to maintain that ledger. So in traditional banks, we know who's getting paid. Those bankers and their shareholders are getting paid. Who's getting paid when you pay gas fees on your Ether transaction? Who is getting paid, right? It's a new legion of elite bankers. Before it was the people with the biggest computers. Now we switched to proof of stake. So now it's what? The biggest stakeholders. What does this mean? The people with the most Ether get to say which transactions on Ether are real. And I understand why we do that, because they've got the greatest stake in making sure that its integrity is maintained. But we're just passing money again to a wealthy elite, a different wealthy elite maybe, but it's another wealthy elite. So it's nuts. The thing I love about it is where you see like Primavera de Filippi in France, this great thinker, people who are using the blockchain to understand governance or, models for human interaction. There's the blockchain is a powerful technology and a powerful metaphor and a way to look at, well, how would we, if we could program governance, what would that look like? And and to run experiments and simulation, how would ranked choice voting, with proxies work differently than individual voting? I mean, not that democracy will ever catch up with this, but there's really fun ways to look at way people interact. And once you get the get rich quick thing off it, the internet was fun until people were trying to make money off it. Crypto was fun until it was an investment.
When FTX died, a lot of NFTs died. It's like from the moans and groans I was seeing on the internet, it was as if they'd put a torch to the Museum of Modern Art or something. But it's hard to feel sympathy for people who invested in these things.
Right. I mean, I always feel sympathy for artists who get screwed. no matter what. But, I'm hopeful that many artists understood that when they make, 10,000 random animated GIFs or static GIFs out of some component parts that they've created, that there's a limit to how much money they can actually make off that, and forever. That there were a few, or, hopefully they were recognizing that, if a top DJ and pop star are given free NFTs for them to then go hawking these things on Twitter or at the, VMA Awards. When I saw Steve Aoki, a very big DJ, when he accepted his VMA award, he was just like, to the moon, we're all going to make it. He was, it was worse than even than the Super Bowl ads when some famous movie stars and TV stars started hawking these exchanges. Because I was thinking, wow, so the artist has become the pure pyramid scheme booster. And I understand they want to make money, but those ones, the ones who are getting in at the bottom of those pyramids, were already millionaire artists, just doing a come hither for others. And you always leave someone holding the bag at the end.
So is that like artists being infected by the mindset?
It is in some ways. I hate to blame artists for it. I mean, yeah, some millionaire and billionaire artists were infected, or certainly millionaire artists were infected by the mindset. And they are the ones that I challenge. When I see the artist who developed the original Pepe the Frog comic books, who was not a wealthy guy, able to make some money off Pepe, now that his meme, his little Pepe was turned into an evil meme, and that he was able to reclaim it and make a couple of $1 million off his NFTs. I kind of like that. I can't not. Matt Fury deserves whatever. He's a real artist. He deserves what he can get. But the idea that you can create these almost perpetual motion machines of supposed wealth building with a digital trick is certainly, that's mindset. That's what they should call bootstrapping. It's funny, the almost the best evidence of the mindset is a founder of a startup or a VC. They use the term bootstrapping when they're talking about a real business, right? What bootstrapping comes from is Baron von Munchausen in the story. The idea was that this guy could lift himself up by his own bootstraps, which of course is impossible. You can't pick yourself up, right? So it's this magical thing that can't actually happen. Now, when venture capitalists use the term bootstrapping, what they mean is a business that uses this really weird technique. The idea is that you make something, then sell it for slightly more than it cost you to make, then take the profit and invest it back in your business so that your business can function. So it's the most traditional, real, value-oriented way of starting a business. To venture capitalists, that's magic. Right? That's magic. That's crazy, but it's the opposite. What they're trying to do is magic, which is take all this venture funding and throw it into something and have it grow perpetually forever, like Wired Magazine's Long Boom. So that's how you get these companies like Twitter that when they're making $2 billion a year profit, they're considered an abject failure by Wall Street, because Twitter peaked around $2 billion a year. That's what they were making when they were a 140 character messaging app. You should be able to go to grandma and say, I made a 140 character messaging app. I'm now making $2 billion a year. Yay. But no, that in the mindset is an abject failure because it peaked and stopped at 2 billion. According to the mindset, you've got to keep growing exponentially forever or you're a failure.
Which is not sustainable.
Right? You've got to keep outrunning the damage you're creating.
Oh, my Lord. One of the things you talk about in the book is science and how the mindset is rooted in empirical science. How how does science sort of feed into what we're talking about? And what is the role of science in the predicament du jour here?
Well, again, it's like real science versus scientism is just like the real internet versus the .com boom. So science is cool. Science is the process of building a model based on questions, and you keep asking questions and you keep refining the model. It's a beautiful process. Scientism is a staunchly atheistic, materialist, evidence-based understanding of the world. And it's fine as a meaning system, but it has to acknowledge that there are other meaning systems. Where I got into trouble with this was I was at a party at John Brockman's house, the agent, the literary agent. This was before I was a client of his, but I was kind of cool because I was like the internet kid at the time in the early 90s. No one understood about the internet. So I'd get invited to these parties with all the scientists like, Daniel Dennett and Steven Pinker and, whoever they were, and Richard Dawkins. So I'm at this party with Richard Dawkins talking about memes. I had written a book called Media Virus, which wasn't based on his memes. It was based on sort of, I understood viral media as this sort of unconscious expression of hidden agendas in our culture, so that the Rodney King videotape would spread because there was an unacknowledged conversation that we needed to have. And Dawkins had this very different understanding of memes, that memes basically play human beings, that human beings aren't really alive in the way that we understand it. We're not fully conscious. We don't really have autonomy the way you or I might, or soul or spirit of any sort. We are sort of passively responding to memes, like a cassette recorder playing a tape. And I was making this argument for human beings and the universe that we're leaning towards something. We're leaning towards, moral outcomes, that there's this, there is a soul in matter, and maybe consciousness preceded matter. It's not an emergent phenomenon of matter. And he and his friends, they were laughing at me with scientism, saying, "Oh, you're Doug, you're a moralist. That's what you are, poor little thing." And then these are the guys that 20 years later, we got pictures of them on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, the Lolita Express, going off to the TED conference, and some of them down to his island and all. And I'm thinking, oh, right. Their amoral understanding of scientism dovetails perfectly well with a guy who thinks that we're just genes, so he may as well spread his seed as far and wide as possible and treat other human beings, these 14, 15-year-old girls, as vessels. But that comes from a scientistic tradition that dates back to Francis Bacon. When he was arguing for empirical science, he said, empirical science will allow us to take nature by the forelock, hold her down, and submit her to our will. So he's from a tradition of scientists, the kind of scientists, the sort of eugenics scientists that Jeffrey Epstein was funding. It's that same tradition come down to us. And that's not real. I don't think that's real science. That's something else. That's scientism as domination in order to make nature more quantified, more containable, less frightening. All that dark, scary, female, soil, night, witchy, forest stuff, right, can be defined and tamed and deanimated by science. Whereas really what we need is the opposite. We need to reanimate, not to get spiritual on you, but we need to reanimate the human soul, the thing that can't be auto-tuned, the real signal. What they're calling noise is what we have to retrieve if we want to develop the social, spiritual, biological immune response, and immunity that we need to move through this next stage of humanity.
What I'm hearing is that much of this stuff is fed by a kind of alienation from the world and reality. And I mean, from a Buddhist perspective, a Buddhist has the sense that we're all connected, that we're all part of everything. And it sounds like you're describing a sense that we are absolutely not connected, that humans are detached from nature, and that nature is a thing to be subjugated.
Yeah, I mean, and I could see even finding a balance between the two, right? Sometimes you do want to kind of dominate nature a bit. Like, oh, and there's ants. There are ants everywhere. I'm going to step on them or move their nest or get them out of here. There's a hornet's nest on my porch. I'm going to dominate a little nature here before it dominates me. I mean, maybe the Buddhist wouldn't do that, but I can see living in a world where we have some balance between the I am one with everything, no distinction, no preference of the enlightened Buddhist, with a bit of I'm going to dig a hole over here because I'm looking for
There's
water.
something in your book about a strategy for like doing away with mosquitoes in a way that works with nature versus against nature. You recall that?
Well,
there was that thing you described where I think that I can't remember exactly what it was. It had to do with removing grasses, maybe.
Well,
or burning away grasses.
There's permaculture ways of doing things, that are more in line with great indigenous practices. So you look at, say, the mindset way of getting rid of mosquitoes was, in a well-meaning, sweet man that he is, Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation, or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they wanted to eradicate malaria in Africa. So they funded mosquito nets for African villages. It was an idea that came up at the World Economic Forum, when the one where Sharon Stone got up and conducted an impromptu auction, or bidding to get donations to get mosquito nets for the African people. And they shipped over all these great mosquito nets, and the Africans used them to catch fish in the local stream. Turns out the mosquito nets not only caught the small baby fish, but also poisoned the water because they had mosquito poison on them, and they killed the fish in their streams, and then we're depending on, more charity for food now. So they didn't, what Bill Gates and his Gates Foundation didn't look at were the second and third order effects, what we systems thinkers would call second and third order effects, other than getting mosquitoes out of their tents. What else is going to happen? Another way, and a lot of this is from Tyson Yunkaporta, who wrote a great book called, what's it called? Stories, what's his book? Well, you're going to look it up. He has a book of great yarns from the Aboriginal people and sand tribes, I think it's called, or sand. You'll look, Yunkaporta. What is it called? Yunkaporta book. It's called Sand Talk. Yeah. And in there, he, and I don't know if it was in that book or when he came on my podcast, we were talking about different ways to move into harmony with nature. So he was saying that the real problem with Western civilization is that we're stationary, where, Aboriginal tribes, indigenous people, learned to move around. And so you'd move, you'd go here when the salmon are there, you'd go over here when that's happening. And then, you would, even as part of your stewardship of nature, you might burn the grass in a certain period, which led there to be fewer mosquitoes. So then later, when you were fishing in the stream where the salmon were coming, you wouldn't be all bitten by mosquitoes, but at the same time, you were actually helping the forest renew itself.
Yeah,
so
that's the thing I was talking about earlier.
Yeah,
that I was remembering from the book.
Right. So there were all these ways that, the indigenous people had. It's not like they're passive. They're still doing things, but they're doing things after observing nature and making, very small incremental changes in order to, live in harmony with nature, rather than, clear cutting a forest and then, trying to feed more and more Monsanto chemicals to plants because the topsoil has been completely eroded by a monocultural agriculture.
My opinion of a lot of the billionaire philanthropists is being similar to the person who lives a really horrifyingly bad, evil life, and on their deathbed suddenly finds religion. thinking that, well, that'll get me off and I'll go to heaven. And that's kind of how I see it. Well, like Bezos, giving away his fortune, supposedly. Are there really good billionaire philanthropists?
Well, if you're a good billionaire, you don't need to be a philanthropist, right? Because you've been making your money in a way that helps the world. There's almost no way to be a good billionaire, because if you've accumulated that much money, then you've extracted, there's no reason to. The closest thing to a good billionaire was the Patagonia guy, who had to try to get rid of that company. It was really hard. He let it go too long. So he ended up in a state of financial obesity, where, what do? How do you offload this tremendous burden? And he managed to turn it into basically into a nonprofit. At great tax expense and this and that. It wasn't done efficiently, but he managed to do it. And almost nobody is doing that. But no, most of these guys are not looking for that. Some of them do mean well, right? They mean well for humanity. I don't think Ray Kurzweil, when he's dedicating himself to uploading human consciousness to the computer, I think he looks at that as our last best hope for continuing something slightly human, moving forward. I think Elon Musk genuinely believes we've got to get off this planet if we want to survive, because this place is trashed. I think, Bezos is similar. We've got to, he wants to use space in order to do all our mining and dangerous things up there. Although the amount of energy you need to get your mining up there is pretty intense. I don't know if that works on a physics level. I still feel like we've got, we would have an easier path of, changing the way we do things in order to move towards something more resilient, rather than pedal to the metal. Let's, use more, the bigger, louder, second verse, same as the first, but louder. I don't think is gonna do it.
How about Peter Thiel? What do you think he wants?
Peter Thiel, well, he's pretty explicit about what he wants. It's kind of a techno monarchy. He believes that, a few people can rise above everybody else, and sort of, operate from one order of magnitude above, the common man. And that many people kind of want that. That's part of what, what they feel, what he and Musk and other people who donated to Trump originally, what they feel. The smart ones, if you want to use that word, the ones who are doing it kind of cynically and intellectually, feel that this is their proof that there's a lot of people who really do want an authoritarian just to run things and to tell them what to do, that democracy was kind of a failed experiment, and that there's something much better. Let people feel like they're free, and that's going to matter more to people than that they have any kind of real rights. And so Thiel believes, and who's to say he's not right? I'm sure Kissinger believes this is true too at this point, that he or someone like him could administrate humanity better than we poor idiots can care for ourselves.
How does that relate to the Steve Bannon kind of thing of like creating chaos and burning everything down?
Well, they're strange bedfellows. Steve Bannon is very suspicious. In the end, Steve Bannon doesn't like Peter Thiel or any of the techno solutionists. Steve Bannon sees these tech bros. It's interesting. Steve Bannon loved my book, Team Human, and kept trying to get me to go on their podcast. I couldn't do it because I didn't want to endorse what he's doing by, implicitly endorse his worldview. But there's a strain of fascists who see technology and techno-utopianism as the main enemy. That woman who won, the ultra right-wing woman who won in Italy, the speech that she made when she won, as head of the parliament there, was, I am not a number, I am not a consumer, I am a human being. And that's what a lot of the Bannon style fascists believe is that we've got to return to our, fundamental, more natural state, and that this technocracy is the way that the elite, the World Economic Forum and the World Bank and Davos guys and Gates and all, the way that they're trying to control humanity and take away our power. To a certain extent, they're right? But they're at least that part of it, that human beings, I mean, what do we have in common with Hitler? You got to look at it finally. Hitler like nature, right? Hitler like humans, and Hitler also like killing
magic.
people, and magic.
Like the occult. Yeah.
And the occult, like psychedelics, so they have certain things in common, but he was having a bad trip because he had a very different setting, right? About the world.
You talked a little bit in your book about how you and Sam, who is I'm sure some other name, got into Q, the whole discussion of Q and QAnon. So how does that phenomenon relate to what we've been talking about?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I see followers of Q are people who take Gates and Musk and Thiel and Bezos at their word. The people who believe that, these technologies can actually do what these people claim, they're the most afraid, and you would be too. I mean, luckily, none of us, Musk can't even run Twitter, much less, I'm not afraid of him. These guys don't have that capacity. Their technologies don't have those capabilities. They can't program us into submission. For all of the brilliance of a movie like The Social Dilemma, on Netflix, which showed, the nefarious intent of the social networks. The problem with those movies is they make it look like they really work. That human beings, we're so susceptible, and all they have to do is, throw an algorithm at us and we're all going to slit our wrists. No, we're not. Most of us do not respond like that. I mean, yes, the vulnerable do. They're vulnerable. The most vulnerable among us are you need to be protected from this stuff. But the guys making these things, they're not wizards. The Las Vegas slot machines, sure, there's some gamblers who get stuck on them, but I don't see you there. I don't see me there. I've been there. I played with them and I left, right? And it's not because I'm super. It's not because I've got God on my side or some great spirit, right? So, just because they took the Las Vegas slot machine algorithms and put them into TikTok, doesn't mean that, oh no, now all is lost. But the kind of people who believe it, who really believe it, they will go full Q. I enjoyed Q at the beginning because it seemed like to me, and one of my best friends from school, it seemed like the ultimate interactive novel. They finally did it. It was like interactive novel meets reality TV. So we're using the news as our fantasy role-playing rule book. So instead of dwarfs and dragons and, those, and instead of those things, it's, Iran and nukes and Hillary, so you can construct a fantasy role-playing universe. And what they did, which was so sweet, was they created almost a yes and improvisatory world out of it. So one person could, Bill Gates put nano in his vaccines, and the next person, yes, and they're being distributed at Walmart, yes, and Hillary Clinton is a former board member of Walmart, yes, and Hillary Clinton has children in the basement of this pizzeria. So as long as, and it didn't matter if it was inconsistent, it was like this great what's his name, who's the guy that does the brain, the brain, or a hypertext adventure. It's like everything connects to everything else. There's this great feeling of satisfaction that comes when you make another link and build another link and build another link. It's the great stoned internet game, but it's not real, right? It's not real. And it was when I saw the crossover, when I saw my friends, rather than doing it as play, there's something so captivating about it. So you work in a magazine for a while, and then your editor cuts a paragraph that was important to you. We've all, as professional journalists, we've all had that. And usually a year later, we're thankful the editor cut that so we didn't look like a friggin' idiot at the time. You may fight for it a little bit, but then you accept it as this is what it means to work with other people. And this is life. These days, they cut that paragraph. That's because they're censoring it, because I'm saying the truth about vaccines and Hillary and Bill Gates and da-da-da. So I'm going to go off and make my own Substack now, taking my ball and going elsewhere. Yeah. And now you're gone, and then you get audience capture, and the weirder you are, the more positive reinforcement you get. And then you're off to the races. And, I've seen some of the best minds of my generation, go down that path. And it's a shame. It's a shame. And I know, them, if they're listening to me now, they're thinking, oh, that's because Rushkoff, you're still stuck in the paradigm. You're caught. And it's like, no, I'm dancing between paradigms here. It's like, it's really easy. It's like your life, back to Buddhism. Life is like the Tibetan Book of the Dead happens when you're alive. It's not necessarily when you're dead. There's the things to be afraid of that can make you fall off the even path, and the things to be attracted to that make you fall off the path. How do you maintain, how do you entertain them all when actually believing none of them? It's that Robert Anton Wilson-like training that I think people need. It's that humor, and it's all okay. It's okay to be skeptical of everything. And then you're doing the dance, but it's a hard place to be, particularly in a scary world that feels like it's ending.
Earlier, you talked about tech bros going down and getting involved with psychedelics with their shaman. You also observed how Burning Man is somewhat changed from its origins. And who's to blame for that?
Blame? Human nature. I mean, who's to blame, that when I talk to people who were at the original acid tests that they did in the barns, with Stuart Brand and the Grateful Dead. And I'm like, why did those stop? And Stuart, I think he was the one that told me. He said, oh, well, these guys showed up who just wanted to take advantage of tripping girls. So who's to blame for that? Toxic masculinity, society itself. I think what's to blame for the, let's call it the decline of Burning Man is the institutionalization of something. I think great things, like great TV shows, the best ones are sort of planned to have 3 or 4, maybe 5 seasons. Then you let them go. It's like it kind of outstayed its welcome, and then it grew into this other thing of RVs. And once you've got people going to Burning Man with servants and RVs, it's not Burning Man anymore. It's something else. But I've seen things maintain. I mean, the Grateful Dead parking lot kind of maintained its truth, right? I mean, I was there in the 90s, and it seemed pretty fucking awesome still. There are things that do, but you've got to really have a really good set and setting, and the culture has to maintain that set and setting. And if you lose that, then it goes. But I mean, everything does, and everything does, and it's okay. I mean, I wonder how NASCAR started, right? Or the World
My
Cup.
sense of it is kind of like, I mean, you hear this about Austin all the time. Austin has really grown and has become kind of a tech capital. And now Elon Musk lives here and Tesla is here. And it's a really different place. I mean, it's radically different from Austin in the 1970s, 80s, whatever. But the people who've lived here all along and who were here in those times, they still know each other. They have places they go. I mean, I think Burning Man is the same way. I think people have been going to Burning Man for however long it's been, 30 years. They still go off into their niche, and they're still doing the same thing. And for them, it's kind of the same thing, even though they've got a lot more shit going on around them.
Well, I guess the internet is too, right?
Yeah.
We were on the internet before Usenet got connected to AOL and all the newbies came. Remember that moment when everyone came and wanted to know how to download GIFs because they were looking for porn. It was like, oh my, they remember it was crazy, right? It was a crazy moment. But those of us who were around it, we're still, old school. You find your little places. There's places on Mastodon where I'm finding conversations that are like, oh my gosh, this is like, these are smart people having a real conversation. No one's worried about their hit counts and how many like it. It's just, oh, we're back.
That's Mastodon's a weird thing. I mean, it's a weird thing in that sense that people are showing up that I haven't really communicated with in years because there was so much noise on Twitter that I never saw them, never heard from them. Well, they're all kind of showing up on Mastodon now. And it's like having a sense of community that you had lost and kind of remembering what it was and said, oh yeah, this is what it is. So the internet was a thing early on that really did get changed, and it became harder and harder to make those connections, I think.
Yeah, but not impossible. And that's why I feel like our job now as the former counterculture is to keep a torch lit, is just maintain a path for, people from the future, for, that's, and it's okay. I mean, not everyone has every job, and it's okay. It's like, okay, so these people's job is to try to figure out climate and get corporations to stop and all that. These people's job is to figure out currency and have more equitable enterprise. And some people's job is how do we keep a path lit, and that's a pretty fucking valid thing to be doing, right? And again, you're right. It's not a matter of throwing up one's arms and saying, oh, look what they did to the TED Talk. Look what they did to Burning Man. Yeah, you can complain. We can all sit and complain. Look what they did to pop music. Look what they did to, Spotify. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it started out that way, but we still have alternatives. And when you talk, not that you got to go travel, but you talk to indigenous people, you talk to the Maori, you talk to, go talk to the Hopi. They're a lot closer. They're not quite worried the same way. There's not that same brittle understanding of culture. There's something else. I talked to people about, oh my God, the end of civilization. And they're like, civilizations have died before. What do you think? Civilizations always die. Of course they die. You can't maintain it. Civilizations are born to die. It's just, I always feel like this one's going to take the whole thing down with it. The world will hit an oceanic tipping point of salinity and everything in it'll die. All the fish are gone or something else. It feels like, to me, that feels like there are unhealable catastrophes that could come down the pike.
Didn't Tyson say something you like, oh, there've been apocalypses before?
Yeah.
We lived through them. We recovered.
Yeah. You just got to keep moving.
Yeah, the politicians here in Texas are very much trying to keep the status quo with fossil fuels. No matter how many times we've witnessed the degradation of the environment, they still have all of these great fossil fuel companies here in Texas that manage to direct any legislation that might harm them, into the wastebasket of the legislature, and that seems to be happening all over the country, all over the world, actually.
Yeah, it's hard. They do seem to have a capture on that. I mean, and that's part of why some really disparate groups have the same kind of accelerationist agenda. You've got this sort of Zizek extreme Marxists on the one hand saying, let's just tear it all down. 9/11 was necessary. Trump is necessary because it's going to tear apart, the neoliberal order. And you've got the fascists who want that because it will tear down democracy. And you got the authoritarians who want it because it tears down the technocratic state. So, this capture of our society by large multinational conglomerates makes strange bedfellows out of environmentalists, anti-Semites, and libertarians. I don't think that tearing things down is really ever the best approach. I'm much more of an incrementalist. How do we move towards? I feel like what most of these movements lack is a coherent theory of change. They all have an end. They have an enemy and an end goal, but they don't actually have a theory of change that's nonviolent or that centers the most vulnerable as we move forward. And I think if they focused on the theory of change rather than the end state, they end up getting somewhere way, way better. I mean, it's a way more Buddhist approach, but your theory of change is your movement. That's all you've got is your theory of change. So what are we going to do? And that's why in my book, in my work, I go to super simple things. Like you got to make a hole in your wall to hang a picture. What are you going to do? Are you going to go to Home Depot and get a minimum viable product drill that will maybe work twice until you have to throw it away? Or do you have the courage to go to your neighbor and knock on the door and ask if you could use their drill? Their nice big metal drill that's going to last 50 years and you can share it. And yes, they might knock on your door and ask if they can borrow something of yours after that. That's not a scary thing. That's a good thing. That's called community. It's fun. You may learn the person's name and then want to play cards with them. They may have a beautiful niece that you get married to. It's like, it's all good. And if we can slowly look for opportunities to meet people and share with other people, that's mine. It regrows, it retrieves community. It means, yes, if you're buying less drills, then what happens to all those jobs at the drill company? Going to force you to look, oh, wait a minute. So what do we do? Do I live my life in order to serve the economy? Or do I need to build an economy that serves who we are now? What if we actually don't need to work 5 days a week? What if it turns out we only need 3 days of labor per person? What if it turns out the main reason why people are getting jobs now is not because we need work done, but because we need a way to justify sharing the spoils of capitalism with them? Well, then what? So these are the sort of super simple ways to unwind what has become untenable and to start living life as I was going to say, as it should be lived, but to start living life as we might want and choose to live it.
Well, there's something, I think that you said something in your book about how we're not solitary, we're not like a bunch of individuals. We're all connected in some way.
Yeah.
And we have to acknowledge those connections.
Yeah. Being human is a team sport. There's no such thing as an individual. Even our nervous systems are connected to. You don't need ESP or whatever. Polyvagal theory, there's not one nervous system. How do your cells talk to each other? Well, it's the same as human beings. We are well, potentially anyway, acting in concert with each other. And even if we're not acting in concert with each other, we are feeling with one another. It takes a lot of effort for a billionaire to be able to cut himself off from all the other people around him. We're feeling it all the time. The same way your dog knows you're coming home before you even open the door. They feel you. Well, we feel each other too. That's not gone. And once we open up to that, one's priorities change pretty fast.
Well, our hour is up, and that sounds like a perfect place to end our conversation.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you.
Unless you want to go on, we could go on for another hour, and then we have 2 shows.
Okay. All right. I'll see you guys soon.
Okay,
All
we'll
right.
see you. Have a great one.
Take care. Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.
You can follow the Plutopia News Network at plutopia.io. On Facebook, go to @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. With John Levkowski, I'm Scoop Sweeney. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.